Our dear viewers, our dear guests, fellow citizens, a good afternoon and welcome back to your favorite series, the Inter-University Debate Show. My name is Sharon Mukisa, your host for this particular episode. And today's critical topic is around the fragility of the East African community, a case study of the Indian Ocean saga. So with me today, I have guests who are educators, they are youth, they are students, and are going to be diving deep in this conversation with me. So allow me introduce them in no particular order. So first and foremost, we have Nuwagaba Wright, who is from Makerere University. We are very happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And next we have MP-elect, non-resident from UCU, who is Kaweesa Mark. We are very happy to have you on the show.
I'm also glad to be here.
Okay. And next is a lady on the panel today, Akandida Constance. We are very happy to have you on the show. She's from UCU as well.
Thank you.
All right, next, last but certainly not least, is Nelson Buyinza, who's from Makerere University. We are happy to host you today.
Thank you so much.
All right. So diving into our topic today, which is the fragility of the East African community. So for a long time, the East African community has been a symbol of collective aspirations for economic prosperity, for political growth, and so much more. But beneath the vision that the East African community has underlies its fragility, underlies so many tensions in regards to historical tensions and many more. And today we are going to dissect how the vision of the East African community together with national interests could align so as we can know and be rest assured that the future of the East African community is in safe hands. So before we dive deep into that conversation, we need to understand that the East African community for a long time has been a symbol of collective aspirations for economic growth, for political cooperation, and so much more for the region. And beneath all of that cooperation and those inspirations and that vision lies a fragile vision based on historical tensions, national interests, and so much more. So understanding how we could dissect or integrate the two with the vision of the ESC and national interests for the various countries. We need to understand how the two can work together so that we ensure that the future of the ESC is stable. So discussing that, and before we dive into that, we need to understand the history, how Uganda and how East Africa came to be divided into so many parts or so many countries as it is right now. And some are landlocked, some have privileges, more privileges to the Indian Ocean. So taking us through the history today, the pre-colonial, the colonial, and the post-colonial history, also integrating the dream of having a united region is Mark Kaweesa.
Thank you so much, Sharon, to host me on this show. My name is Mark Kaweesa, as earlier introduced, and I'm going to be taking you through the brief history, the pre-colonial history, the colonial history, and the post-colonial times of East Africa. Now, pre-colonially in East Africa, we didn't have the states that we have today. We didn't have Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We only had one common land, but we had different societies, and the societies were centered around centralized societies, uncentralized societies, and individual personalities. You will have an example of the Maasai people in Kenya. These people lived in elder council groups and age groups. For the centralized societies, we had Buganda Kingdom in Uganda. The uncentralized societies, we had very many in East Africa, especially in Tanzania. Now for the colonial times, around the 19th century, in 1885, we happened to have a conference in Berlin where Chancellor Otto von Bismarck and other European countries sat and decided to partition and scramble East Africa. Now they came in different categories. They first came as explorers. We later saw them as missionaries and later colonialists. Now when they came using companies. We had the East African Ibiako company, we had the German company in Tanzania, and the German company was taking over Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi, and then Ibiako, the Imperial British East African Company, taking over Uganda. Now they came, they took over the political, they took over the economical and social structures of East Africa. But later we had a dream of nation building. We had a country, we had different countries. They formed different countries. They later divided us, made borders, called different lands, different countries. In around the early 1960s, in 1962, Uganda had its own independence. Around 1961, Kenya had its independence and Tanzania had its independence. And we started the dream of nation building, that is post-colonial times. Now, East African community came into existence around 1967, and it started with Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. The East African community had a dream of integration, political integration, economic and social integration. Now later, when different presidents later came into power, especially presidents who were non-Pan-Africanists, a good example is Idi Amin Dada, around 1977, he had his own wrangles with every East African country. You used to remember the wrangles between Tanzania and Uganda around the Mwanza region, the Kagera region, the conflicts between Uganda and Kenya, and then the different political ideologies among these East African countries. Kenya had taken a capitalist approach, whereas Tanzania had taken a socialist approach. Now, all these different circumstances saw East Africa starting to collapse. Now, around 1977, East Africa collapsed, and we didn't have the East African community because of Idi Amin and his own conflicts with other presidents. But later, around 1999, when President Museveni came to power in Uganda, by then we had President Arap Moi in Tanzania, and then we had another president in Kenya, that was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. We had East Africa once again. We formed the East African community once again, and we formed nation building once again. Now later, in 2007, we had Rwanda and Burundi join East African community, and then since then, we have been trying to formulate the East African community with one dream, an integration dream, a dream for all East Africans to have one East African region for economic prosperity. That is the brief history of where we are till now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. And this question goes to Constance. Dating back to right now, the post-colonial era, because as he has explained, there's so many stages that we have come through, from the pre-colonial, colonial, and now the post. Is it still the dream of having the whole region integrated, or are we just dreaming daylight? Is this really going to happen? Is it possible for it to happen that one time at a point we shall have East Africa, Tanzania, so we shall have Tanzania, Uganda, and all the countries in East Africa as one country?
To me, based on the post-colonial times, it's not going to be possible. And the reason is because one of the dreams for regional integration was to work together. Not specifically to have one country, but work together politically, socially, and economically. So the reason why it will not be possible for us to have these countries as one is because of their differences. At some point, we're having political differences. Giving an example, currently, the East African community has other countries, including South Sudan. And because of its political nature, you cannot trade with it fully. Yet it is the reason for the formation of the East African community, which came after the dream of regional integration. So my answer would be that this won't be possible based on the political interests, then superiority. These countries are having different economies. They're at different levels. I do not expect them to work together at some point, yet they are leaving each other.
Okay, thank you very much. Coming to Nelson, given the fact that there are so many countries that are examples of unifications, we've had the unification of Germany, we've had the unification of Italy, shouldn't we expect the unification of East Africa as well? Because these countries are now doing well. They are well advanced in technology, in manufacturing industries, and so many infrastructures. So wouldn't you hope the same vision for East Africa?
Okay, thank you. I think the hope itself, I like that you said, wouldn't I hope for that? I think you also hope for the same thing, because I hope for an integration, because it helps you strengthen borders, it helps you strengthen economies. But beyond that, the examples of united countries, the countries that you've given in examples of unification of Italy, unification of Germany, you have to look at precedent. You have to look at what caused them to actually come to come together. You have to look at the fact that these countries had common goals. They actually wanted to do it, even when they were faced by different difficulties. the same difficulties we are facing, that is to say, sovereignty struggles whereby different leaders in different states want to remain with that power that they hold. Because if at all that dream was to come to Africa or East Africa, you wouldn't look at a president like Museveni wanting to lose power. So because of that, different state sovereign power leaders, power holders in countries, don't want to lose that power. So I think even when we hope for it as people that are on the grassroots level, it becomes more of a dream or more of us hoping for it to happen. But you look at, would these presidents actually want to lose that sovereignty that comes with being the president of Uganda to being a person that is under a president of East Africa as a country? So I think when you look at those countries, it is good and okay for them that they were able to unite. But as much as I hope for it, I don't think it is possible because of the sovereignty that exists in different countries. But secondly, as Constance said, we have different levels of like a development, right? I don't think that would like necessarily mean that we can't be able to like manifest that kind of dream, but it becomes much difficult when these countries want to be able to develop on their own. But also you look at how we have become disintegrated based on ethnicity. Uganda as one country is failing to unify itself based on tribalism. What happens when you want to have Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania that have their own differences ethnically within themselves? What happens when you want to tell them to unite and become one country? So if at all Uganda as a country, I'm going to give Uganda as a country, if we can't unite basing on tribes, basing on ethnicity, then I don't think the dream to have a united East Africa can become manifest.
Okay, do you think there is any reason as to why that cannot be possible? Because in the pre-colonial era, we didn't have these artificial borders. Colonialists are the ones that came and started to draw marks as to where this country ends, the other country begins. But other than that, people would move freely. People would move to the Indian Ocean freely. People would move all over from Tanzania to Kenya. People would move freely. So would you still take your stand that it's because of maybe ethnicities? That's the reason as why we cannot unite as East Africa?
Okay, I'm going to answer that in two ways. Firstly, is that when you look at pre-colonial era, when you had no colonial borders, because we have learned to rely on all colonialism caused the disintegration of African states. But there was still a lot of marginalization based on superiority. When you come to Uganda, the reason as to why when they were signing the Buganda agreement, they referred to Buganda as the kingdom of Uganda is because it assumed superiority in Uganda. So even then, there was already a marginalization within those countries. So you find that the reason as to why they had like expansionist wars was because they could not like integrate themselves to come together. The assumption that we always have is that, oh, without colonial borders, we can actually become united. But if we can't beat the ethnicity that exists, if we can't beat the ethnic marginalization that exists, if as a person that comes from Bunyoro, you can't be able to like unite with someone that comes from Buganda. If the Baganda still have an issue with the Acholi just because they keep on referring to precedent of Obote versus Mutesa too, those incidents, if we can't get over that because we feel like we are entitled to we are more inclined to our ethnicity than to our nationality, we cannot necessarily get away from that. But secondly, even if that was true, you cannot, right now the truth is we are already divided by colonial borders, right? So you cannot take away those colonial borders because each and every country is entitled to its sovereignty. So at a point in time that you want to be able to like extend into the sovereignty of another state, it becomes very much detrimental to you as a country. It goes against international law and it simply cannot manifest.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned something about sovereignty, and this question goes to Wright. I would like to understand or to ask you a question. Do you think that Uganda is extending its sovereignty to Kenya by claiming that the Indian Ocean is for the president, because those were his words? Because recently we see that Uganda is all over East Africa. You find soldiers are deployed in Somalia, they're deployed in Congo. There is a piece of Uganda in every country. So Uganda coming out to claim that the Indian Ocean is theirs and claiming that there is a passage through Kenya, don't you think that Uganda is overextending its sovereignty into another country?
Now, personally, I think if I were to break it down to break down the statement that was made, I think quoting it, he said, the president of Uganda said that the Indian Ocean is mine. Now, I do not I am trying to anticipate. I think the best thing is to anticipate that when he said mine, he meant maybe East Africa, or he meant Uganda as a country, or he possibly meant himself. Now, according to the UN, 4 miles from the shore towards the sea belongs to that particular country. From the shore of Mombasa, 4 miles into the sea, it belongs to Kenya. The rest of the sea is, I think, what they usually term as the high seas, belongs to everyone, that to generally any country who, as long as you have property there, that property is yours. You cannot claim a certain portion of the sea. The issue then is that Uganda wants access to that particular sea or ocean, the Indian Ocean. The moment Uganda wants access to that ocean, without Kenya being the middleman, it is an extension of sovereignty. That is to say, even if they gave them a part of Mombasa and they demarcated and said, I think I discussed this with Nelson, he's uneducated me about this, but if you said that some part of Mombasa belongs to Uganda, Uganda still has to go through Kenya to get to that port, yeah? Even if you gave them that port. That means that Kenya can still have restrictions on Uganda. At the border, they want to check you, they want to tax you, they want to gain from your lack of access to the sea. The second option, which is not really a viable option, is for you to cut a strip. I think there's been memes about this. Is for you to cut a strip of Kenya and say this is Ugandan land or this is Ugandan property. Attach it to the Ugandan map and say this road that leads to that particular port belongs to us. And I think that is an extension of sovereignty. Now, the most plausible solution, which I think is not going to happen anytime soon, that would not affect sovereignty, is to take on maybe a stance of how the US operates, or other countries, how other countries on other continents operate in terms of access to the sea. Look at the United States. It is split into certain, it is divided into, I think I want to call them states as well. This is a country divided into states. They have leaders, specific leaders. Those states have access to the sea because they are not, each of them has certain laws that govern them, and people make those laws, the leaders they choose to make those laws, I think governors. But the US as a whole has one constitution. I think this is what lacks in East Africa. The US as a whole has one particular constitution, and this constitution governs how they operate. You will not tax someone for taking goods through your state to the sea. And I think they have done particularly certain things that mean that I'm not overextending my sovereignty by saying that you're not taxing. Okay, by asking you not to tax my property. And I say this is a solution that is not close in the future because of the history of Uganda. As he said, I think as Nelson said, and as he referred to, there was Buganda, Bunyoro, and I don't think referring to colonial borders as the problem is the actual problem. There's Buganda, there's Bunyoro, they are different states. They have had wars, they've had conflicts. This has taken this one's counties or etc. And I think then the issue is not the difference in ethnicity or the difference in nationality. I think the issue is in how human beings treat lines on land. Yeah? If I have a certain property and it belongs to me, yeah, as an individual, I do not want you to interfere with that property unless I am benefiting. I end up making stringent rules where I can control you, and I think Museveni addresses this. Politically, we are stunted. Any disagreement with Kenya, and we could go into a spiral of poverty as a country. I think there was an event where Kenya blocked us from using its port, and the oil prices went really high. And it wasn't just the oil. For some reason I can't explain economically, the soap also went high. At the end of the day, the price of transportation is still attached to the commodities that people are purchasing, because there's a commodity that is made in Kampala and someone is going to buy it in Gulu. If oil prices go high because you can't import something, it means that everything in the country, there's going to be inflation in that particular country. So we are at chokehold when you say that we can't access the sea. But then I think still, as people, there's a way we should really look at generally lines on land or on paper. I think there's this meme, I want to call it a meme, and a man puts an ant on a paper, yeah? He draws lines on this particular paper, and the ant can't cross the lines because it thinks they are barriers, they are black in color. The moment it crosses those lines, he can't stop it again. No matter how many lines he draws, it keeps crossing them. That's the moment it crosses. Now, you think this is really funny and it is a dumb animal. It doesn't understand. They are just lines. But then the meme ends with a map of generally a globe with all the lines in between that we can't cross because they belong to a certain group of people simply because they are lines. So even with the existence of borders, I think we put a lot of limits on them, too many limits on how we can access certain borders. Maybe you're trying to prevent criminals, but at the end of the day, it's just our hubris of not wanting strangers in our particular land, and yet they are productive to us. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. You talked about how that statement has been interpreted.
Yes.
It could mean, like, I would take this from your words, it could mean it's his, it could mean it's for the country, it could also mean it's for East Africa.
Yes.
So coming to Mark, I would like to understand, what do you think is the role of diplomats in this current situation? Because we've had so many people come up and interpret this statement on their own. So many people, as in the common man, those in business, the political analysts, everyone is interpreting it in a different way. So what do you think should have been the role of diplomacy in this situation?
The role of the diplomats would be dialogue in the first instance, because the diplomats are meant to dialogue between Kenya and Uganda, the different diplomats. Now, the diplomats haven't done their work properly, but then the presidents themselves, because even the President Ruto said he cannot stop Museveni from getting the seat because he's the father of the nation. And he said this publicly. Now, where the presidents have stated this publicly, it means it becomes an issue for the public. Now, the diplomats, you can't blame them that they haven't done their work, yet they weren't included in before. President Museveni said that his problem with Kenya is that he has been trying to negotiate access to the sea. You see, our problem is not access to the sea, but our problem is that we have expensive access to the sea. Now, he said that he has been trying to get access to this sea with the different presidents of Kenya, but he finds a problem that he's still negotiating with this president, and then Kenya brings in a new president. He's still negotiating with another president, and a new president comes in. Now, for him, he used an example and said that if you are living on a storage building and you're living in the upper floors of the storage building, it means the compound of this building, it also belongs to you. Now, someone who is staying near the compound, let me say on the lower floors, cannot start claiming that the compound of this storage building only belongs to them. No, even you living on the upper rooms, on the upper stairs, it belongs to you. Now, our problem, as I said, is expensive access to the sea. Now, how should we handle this? And when we are talking about integration is the best way of handling this issue. But someone said integration, Nelson said integration may not come to manifest because of the difference in ethnicity and everything. But I think for that purpose, you see, the countries, the reason as to why South American countries are way back or are poorer to these countries in North America is because they didn't integrate. Now, integration is very possible. It can come to manifest if you do it in an equitable way. You see, for the USA, these different federal states integrated and formed one state. But believe me or not, it's a matter of acceptance. Even in a federal system, these different states don't weigh the same politically and economically. You find the New York state is more economically developed than, let me say, the state of Dakota or Manhattan. Now, it is about acceptance. We can unify, we can bring integration to manifest if we use a federal system. Ethiopia has been using this system and it has worked out. Now, this system helps different states or people in different states work harder because, let me say, we have one region of East Africa and we see Uganda is lagging behind than Kenya, but we accept it. But let me say, Kenyans are more hardworking than us, or Kenyans are using different styles and systems than us. Now, the issue is acceptance. We have to accept. Like he said, Buganda was more developed than, let me say, Bunyoro. It was an issue of hard work. Buganda people were more hardworking, maybe, than they actually, or they had different strategies. Now, when you accept that, and all you do is copy from the other people or try to work hard, then you can have a federal system that works.
Okay, so Mark, are you trying to say that it is possible for East African countries to unite?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And moving on to Constance, I would like to ask a question. Still in the interpretation of what the president said, do you think that the president declared war by mentioning a statement such as that?
I don't think so. And my opinion on that is, I think we have misunderstood this thing. To me, this statement is being misunderstood, especially on social media. There is how people are taking it, and to me, according to his statement, I don't think he meant having maybe a certain route to the Indian Ocean. I think he meant something to do with unity. Like someone earlier stated, we are having an issue. By the way, this border, it's not like there is a fence, no. I've ever been to the border of Congo and Uganda, then also Rwanda and Uganda. That thing, it is just there, they are telling you, Uganda ends here and Rwanda begins. Uganda ends here, Congo begins. There is nothing like there is a fence to stand there or something, but it is really in someone's mentality. I don't have to cross here because it is Rwanda, it is Congo. That's what. But then according to what the president said, he said the Indian Ocean belongs to him. And giving an example of a storied building, he said if you're staying in the upper floor, you own the compound. Now meaning, it's not like he meant like per se he's the owner, but he meant it belongs to everyone, which is a sense of unity. And to me was bringing in the idea of these countries working together, making things easy for countries like Uganda that are landlocked to access this Indian Ocean. Like Wright said, we are having an issue. If at all they cross these borders, people are not going to trade well. And when they fail to trade well, now what happens? These countries like Uganda, which are landlocked, which have no access to the Indian Ocean, yet is the main transport system to transport the goods. Then secondly, another example I can give, there is a time they had closed the Rwandan border of Kabale, the Katuna border. I come from that side. We usually had market for our goods that side because they were being exported to Rwanda. By that time it became tough because they were no longer exporting their goods. Now we're there suffocating depending on just the local market. And depending on the local market, we're getting less prices for the goods, which was different when those borders were open. So to me what he meant East African countries have to work together. They make it easy for countries like Uganda, Rwanda, and the others, and Burundi, to make it easy for them to access this because they need it. Either way, they need it. That's my idea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Constance. So far, that has been our discussion for the first segment on our topic on the fragility of the East African community. The guests have given their perspectives, and we'd like to know what you think in the comment section down below. We are taking a break and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back for the second segment. Still, our topic is on the fragility of the East African community, a case study of the Indian Ocean saga. So we had dropped off, or we had left off, where the guests had explained to us the history of East Africa, the pre-colonial, the colonial, and the post-colonial, and the possibility of having an integrated East African community. And now, still diving into our questions, this question goes to Nelson. I'd like to ask, in this current era of political activism, because we are seeing so many riots going on in Tanzania, Kenya, is it a time for the head of state of Uganda to come out and make a statement such as the Indian Ocean is mine? Don't you think it is rather a very, very strategic time. It's rather a time that is not right for such statements because it could raise so much more.
Okay, that's a really good question. I don't think there is ever a right time to say such statements, especially when you know the implications of what you are saying as a person that was once in the military or is still in the military. But then I think when you look at the Gen Z protests, you have seen Gen Z protests in Nepal, you have seen protests in our in our neighboring country, Kenya. You look at how much incitement, how much small incitement can make people to rise into revolution or to rise into riots. But secondly, I think for a president of a country, there is a lot that can be said. There is a very thin line between what the president says in the capacity of the president and what the president says in the capacity of a human being or as a citizen of the country. I think that is why people go on to like discuss about state immunity or presidential immunity. I think it's a conversation for another panel. But then in this particular situation, I think you must be able to look at how much that affects the diplomatic ties between Uganda and Kenya, because if that statement is to be taken as serious, if that statement is to be taken as serious, that means there can be a lot of diplomatic like wrangles between Uganda and Kenya. When you look at the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the access that Uganda has to the sea is much dependent on the diplomatic level or on the diplomatic ties that we have with Kenya, with the person that is proximate to the sea. That is to say that our access to the sea being free transit is much dependent on how much we're able to like protect our bilateral terms with Kenya. So at a point in time that you declare war in a statement that is made on state television, you then go against the diplomatic ties that you have with it. That means that if at all we are to say peace off the Kenyan president, it means that we go against our diplomatic ties, we go against the bilateral terms. That means that we make ourselves get on a worse chokehold. But then also, I think there is a lot of influence of social media and how this has like created different versions of what the president was saying. When you look at the meme culture and like the normalization of jokes on the internet, you can never really know. And that's why I think we have question on, did he actually really mean it or is it just a joke? That's why you can never really know what someone is saying, because we have normalized a lot of jokes on the internet. And as Gen Z, I think we need to like style up and know what to actually do in different terms. When it comes to questioning what a state president is doing, you must be able to like do it in terms of not just meme culture or not just meme wise, but to be able to like understand the statement, you must be able to like have diplomatic ways or measures of like accessing the president himself, which is not possible for a president that is really protected in terms of like his sovereignty or his immunity. I think that is just it. I think the discussion can go on from there, on if at all we can be able to understand whether or not this person was actually meaning it in terms of like going against the sovereignty of another country, or he actually means it in terms of what it of like unity or uniting Africa or uniting East Africa to make sure that he has access to the sea. But then I just want to talk about what Constance said. Constance's idea is that Museveni means the ocean is mine in terms of uniting East Africa. If the assumption is that, you must be able to analyze and question, if he wants a unified East Africa, is he ready to forfeit sovereignty as a president of Uganda and say that someone else becomes his leader as per a united East Africa? Because the question goes back to, if at all you are given a port, if at all it comes to manifest and you say you are given a port at the Indian Ocean, you still must go through Kenya, right? Because the sovereignty of Kenya itself still stands. You are given a port at Kenya and you are a sovereign leader, a sovereign owner of that port as your land, but you still have to go through another sovereign state. That is what Wright was talking about, that you must still go through Kenya. So the cost that you incur to reach the port, the cost that you incur to like get goods from the port to your country do not change. The only thing that changes is that now you have a port that is under your name, but you don't change the cost that you incur to transit goods from the port, because you don't just create a mechanism where you teleport from Uganda to the port that is now yours at the Indian Ocean. So I think the question then comes to, what is actually the relevance of him saying that the ocean is his, if at all those costs cannot be cut practically.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to rebut?
To rebut what he has just said,
yes.
I'd like to hint on something that we are all avoiding in this conversation.
Okay.
The mine, the my ocean thing. As I said initially, he could have meant East Africa, which we are very sure he did not mean, judging on what he said next and how it was interpreted by the people. He could have possibly meant Uganda as a country, but with the political culture that has been taking place in this particular state of leaders amassing state wealth for personal benefit, I do not think that is what he meant, or I would not like to think on probabilities. There is an assumption he meant mine, because he's I would like to call him a military president, I think, because the military brought him in and he has not been taken out, and there has been a hint on he can only be taken out by the military, even when we have elections which with the extent at which he has been winning, we can, I think, satisfactorily say he's either too good or there is a rigging of elections. And he's too good. I don't think he's an angel from heaven, otherwise we'd be worshipping him like Jesus. But I think we need to understand that when a president says mine, and the following statement that particular president says is that we do not have a navy, like we do not have ships on the sea and trained soldiers to operate on the sea, it means that the intention of that individual is not a trade benefit for the country. I would like to say that it's not a trade benefit for the citizen in the country. And I think I would explain this in two ways. First of all, we have to understand that laws that govern communities are existent to mitigate the inequalities that we are born with. Say you're born in Uganda, it is a landlocked country. Why is East Africa there, or the East African community there? It is to mitigate that inequality, to say this person, yes, was born with an advantage. They are born in Kenya, they have access to the sea. The East African community is supposed to outbalance that and say Uganda has access to the ocean. But then the only way to do that is to have an East African government. As I said earlier, there is a US and it has a US government. It is to have a US government. And it means that the president of Uganda would not be called the president per se. He would now become governor of Uganda on behalf of the entire state for the people of Uganda. I think that in the state, let's say they have called it East Africa. Yeah? So at the end of the day, where we still have, and I said these two ways. One, where we still have, as he stated, a form of sovereignty, an extreme form of sovereignty that exists in those individual states. I'm not saying they take away their entire sovereignty, it's just that you can give up some, yeah, for the benefit of your people. You're not, the East African community is benefiting and you're part of it. The second thing is that the mine quality. I think we are ignoring as a community, because the memes that are on Twitter or the conversation that is there is just pictures of cows with planes, with aeroplane blades. There is Museveni, or the president, I want to say president, on a surfboard on the sea. But I think we ignore those two particular forms of conversation. We want that equality. He may have hinted on it, but as a citizenry or as a community, Uganda, we need it. We need access to the sea. And the only way we can get it is to give up some sovereignty over our own independence and accept that other countries can do the same. That is, if I think we would like them to do the same on our behalf. I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Wright. You mentioned something about this being a military regime. And yeah, that is true. He came using a military coup. And how he will leave power, we are not so certain. However, he came in using a military coup. So should that be a worry for Kenyans? Because this is someone who has been a military commander. This is someone who got power through a military coup. Should that be a worry for Kenyans, that someone like that can come up and make a statement like that?
I think it would be invalid to say that Kenya shouldn't be worried. With a sovereign of a state saying such a statement, and you guys share a border, and you've not necessarily been on the best terms, yeah, and he says such a statement, it is only prudent to be worried. I think it would be a child's idea not to worry about that. And I think still it is okay to take measures for self-protection at that particular time, and to protect your people. We can't look at it as Ugandans and as Ugandans alone, because it is right for a Kenyan to be worried about the statements a neighboring state is making, because they could be a threat. And then I said, I think you referred to what I said in terms of he was brought in by the military, he hasn't been removed by democracy. So there is a chance for you to, I think there is a valid reason for you to worry because of the nature or of the character of that sovereign that has operated in that state. I mean, look at the things that have changed. Initially, in the 1995 Constitution, presidents are supposed to rule for 2 terms. There is a certain presidential limit. Look at how the police handles riots in Uganda. Initially, I think there was a case in the Supreme Court where they overturned the fact that the police commissioner had a lot of power to stop I don't want to call them riots, but that's the word that's coming to my mind. But people are protests. People are generally in a democracy allowed to protest against a policy that they do not like or a behavior analysis of any person in power. They are allowed to peacefully protest. But when you give someone power to stop them from protesting, even when they can do it peacefully, you're giving them too much power. They took that out of the they took out that act, but the parliament still brought it back. Recently, we have the Kabaziguruka case. Someone is in a court that he's not supposed to be in. It is a military court. They're trying a civilian. And the court says something about it. They're like, no, this is not valid according to the constitution. A little time later, the parliament says, no, it is okay again to do it. And I don't think they change much because I think I'm a law student. I think according to what they changed, I think it can still be reversed by court. But where a sovereign can do that, can change the laws of a country at will, you do not know what limits he has. He has not set a limit for himself in the things that he has done so far in his rule of the country. Even when there is a peace, I think it has been there, not because there is a people that are benefiting from the peace, as any patriotic leader would have it. I think the peace is there so that the people in power, or at the time, benefit. And there's something I heard recently, which I think is very important. Most of the time, it is not the person in power that is the problem. Most of the time, it is those around that person in power. They are accruing too much benefits from him giving them access to office. So they probably want that individual to stay in office. I'm saying most of the time, it's not the individual, it is the people around the individual. And I think we have a certain form of influence in the kind of individuals we send there. You know your member of parliament that you've elected. You know what he's most likely going to do. If he gave you a bribe for you to give him your vote, he's most likely going to receive a bribe to change the constitution in a way that benefits the people in power and not you as an individual. So I think Ugandans, we take these things really lightly. You will make memes, make jokes, talk about it at the bar, have a beer, football match, etc. But at the end of the day, you're not influencing substantial change that can affect your children, that can affect your parents, etc. And then, I mean, it's not just access to the sea, yeah? Look at the country internally. Or an MP is going to get money to repair a road or to work on a road. Yes, he's going to be assigned these particular funds. I'm not saying the state is not doing anything. No, it has assigned funds to that particular individual to carry out a task that helps the people. That fund is going to go into a new car. This is the 10th car. It's going to go into a new house. That's the 3rd house, a mansion, etc. There's a pregnant woman on that road. Yeah, there's a child using that road to go to school. An accident happens because there was a pothole. I think most people don't. There's a theory. I think butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings in maybe Uganda, and there's a tornado in Japan. There's a series of events that affect one another. So someone has gotten the money to repair a road and has not used it. Trade can't take place on that road because cars are knocking each other. People are afraid to use them. Children cannot go to school without parents holding their hands. Pregnant women are not rushed to hospitals in time. So at the end of the day, someone acquiring a 10th Benz is having a very huge impact on the people that are supposed to use those particular services. That time? So those particular services. So if the president of Uganda can say that, and that is how this country is operating, it is not operating as a state, it is operating as a corporation with a CEO who's managing it and cannot be removed whatsoever and is amassing profits, not for the company, but for himself. And we are all, I think, a set of employees in it, being given very little wages. Kenya is so right in being worried. If I were Kenya, I would be very prepared for anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And moving on to Mark. there are so many discussions that have been going on as to what the president said, the Indian Ocean is his, and so many people interpreting it differently in so many ways. So I would like to understand from you, who has authority over the Indian Ocean?
Sharon, you see, for us who are very spiritual, biblically, everything was created by God. Now, in the normal life, you own something if at all you buy it or you made it. Now, this ocean wasn't made by Kenyans, neither Ugandans. And I don't think Kenya bought this ocean. And when you read the Bible story, the waters were made even before human. So to answer that question, this ocean belongs to no one. But then there are laws that have been brought on earth when we are here. And these laws are the ones governing state property or state ownership. Now you realize, like he had said in the UN Charter, that a country owns the sea. He said, I don't remember the miles from the sea.
4 miles?
4 miles from the sea, then you own that part. But then the higher seas, everyone owns them internationally. Now, I want to think, I don't want to think that this ocean belongs to Kenya or Uganda. It even doesn't belong to Museveni. But you see, we have a problem, as he said, our African leaders, because you haven't heard of this wrangle in Europe or Asia of landlocked countries wanting access to the sea. Because that cannot be an impediment of development, you know. Ethiopia is landlocked to some extent, but it is thriving. It is one of the countries that have thriving economies in the whole of Africa. Now, our own problem is that our African leaders, you see, as they say, Kenyans should really be worried, because this president, he might have said it as a joke, but he has been saying things as jokes, and these things have come to life. And what makes it more scary is his son. His son complimented, and he said, there is a time he said he could go to Nairobi and actually take over Nairobi in 24 hours with his army. And the son has been doing these things. The son in Uganda here has been warning opposition people that I will abduct you in a form of a joke. And then he does it. So Kenyans should really be worried, as he said, because this man, I don't want to say he thinks, but he presumes Uganda is his. He has been saying these statements before. He has been saying the opposition in this country want to take over power because they want to take his oils, they want to take his mountains, everything. He thinks everything is his. Now, as he say, Kenyans should really be worried. But then, our president is a very wise man. We all have to agree. He knows that currently the leadership in East Africa are all under him. Because you know, the president of Kenya, Ruto, he actually supplemented in his statement. He said, as I told you, who am I to deny the president of Uganda, the father of East African access to the sea? It is his, if he says so. Now, President Museveni is a very wise man. He has the ability to do what he said. Well, as it may look as a joke, he has the ability. But then he knew who is the president of Kenya. I don't think he would have said that if Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was president of Kenya. He wouldn't have said that if Mwai Kibaki was president of Kenya. Now, he knows Ruto is his good friend, even when he says that Ruto will support him back. So, I don't want us to give this statement much water, because the man knew if it is Kenya, if it is Tanzania, you know the relationship between Museveni and Samia. It is a very good relationship. Even if the integration dream came to manifest, I want to tell you that Museveni will become president. Because all the leaders, maybe apart from the Rwandan president, but all the leaders in East Africa are all below him. They all put much respect to him. Now, this statement, Kenyans should be worried, but Ugandans shouldn't be worried. And East Africa shouldn't be worried. Let us not give much worry to this statement, because the man knew.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to get your opinion, Constance, on who do you think has the authority over the Indian Ocean? And then we could come to Nelson. Nelson, you'd like to rebut what he has said? So yes, Constance, please.
Okay, my opinion about who owns the Indian Ocean. To me, if we look at the position of ownership, there's always ownership and possession. So we'd like to know, are we looking at ownership or we are looking at possession? Now, based on that, if we are looking at who owns the Indian Ocean, I think it is not a country in particular saying Uganda owns it, Kenya owns it. No. It's all about how do we access this. Because I don't think it is like President Museveni wants Uganda to maybe have a certain portion through Kenya, then or maybe they go to the Indian Ocean, they demarcate, make some measurements, and say, this is Uganda. I don't think that's what exactly he means. Like I earlier stated, Nelson said I was talking about unification of East Africa. I don't think I meant that exactly. What I meant is the East African community is meant to have these countries work together, have those that can't access the coast access it very well and easily. It's not like I want them to have one state as one. My idea was this Museveni His Excellency, President Museveni wanted this to have free access, like easily, not at some point like you're blocked from accessing the ocean or that. So about who owns who owns the Indian Ocean, my opinion is not even Uganda, not even Kenya. No one owns the ocean. But then the thing is about accessibility. Then maybe another thing I wanted to say, I wanted to add something on Kenya's worry. Should Kenya be worried? In my opinion, it shouldn't. Like I earlier stated, to me, we have not understood this statement. And when we have sat and analyzed this statement very well, I think so when we should go forward and really say Kenya should either be worried or should not be worried. I was looking at the opinions of both presidents, the president of Kenya and the president of Uganda. With the response of the president of Kenya, do you really think that was really a serious answer? He says they are friends. Yes, they might be friends, but it doesn't defeat the fact that they are presidents. So do you think he really meant whatever he said in response? Or if he meant it, should we think they were having a conversation as the heads of the state? How should we take it? Then looking at social media. To me, social media has really attached a lot of meaning to this statement, though to me it shouldn't have been that way. That's how people are really making it. He talked about memes. There was something I saw, they had created a channel through Kenya, meaning it was even actually creating two parts in Kenya. So meaning Kenya was supposed to have the southern part and the northern part, which I think to me is impossible. Besides, when we look at the borders, if we look at the question of borders, what is a border? I want us to first understand that. What is a border? Or if Museveni says he owns the Indian Ocean, does he have the capacity to access it without passing through Kenya? Meaning we are going to now remove the fact of borders if he really wants to access the Indian Ocean without the border. That's why I'm asking ourselves, what is a border? That's why the question of what is a border is coming in. Because now if he's going to access the Indian Ocean, are we going to maintain the borders created by the colonialists, or are we going to just also dismantle it there and then? That's my opinion. That's what I'm looking at. Let us also analyze the issue of the border. Is the border going to stay if he's to access it? If he's going to take over? That is it.
Okay, thank you. Nelson, you wanted to supplement, say something about Mark's submission?
Okay. Mark says that if Museveni speaks this because he knows the relationship he has with other presidents. I just want to say that even if he knows the relationship that he has with those presidents, these people are in power as sovereign leaders of a sovereign independent state. So at a point in time that someone makes a threatening statement to the sovereignty of your state, because when you're a president, there is an assumption that you are the supreme leader or the executive leader of that state. That means that at a point in time that someone threatens your state, it also means that there is a threat to your power as the executive leader of that country. If at all this becomes manifest and you have an invasion of Uganda to Kenya, because you can never rule out any possibility at this point, right? If at all this happens and there is an invasion of Uganda to Kenya and we are successful and we get the port, it means that you have an invasion into another sovereign state, but also you have an invasion on the presidency of another person that is ruling another state. So if at all this happens, the possibilities are on either side. So if it happens or not, whether it happens or not, you still have to look at the fact that these leaders want to be able to protect their sovereignty as leaders, but they also want to protect the sovereignty of their independent states.
Okay, thank you very much, Nelson. Yes, right. You had something to supplement?
Yeah, I wanted to supplement on the borders. I think we talked about them earlier, but I think there's a lot that has been left out on the options that Uganda could possibly have. Now, the response from the president of Kenya sounds a lot like what we were doing here initially. Human beings, we do not like assuming the worst or the worst possible future. Yeah, we do not like assuming that. Most of us do not want to assume that the guy was serious about the whole thing. Yeah, most of us don't want to think about the consequences of if he was serious, because it would result into a conflict between the two states, and having a conflict is not as in the word is, I think the word is too bare as to what happens in a conflict. Children, parents, drafting of people into the army, etc. It's too much. We do not like to think about that. But I think I talked about the butterfly effect. There may be a border, yeah. There are choices that you're going to make as per the border in East Africa. You can talk to Kenya, and as the president said, the presidents of Kenya keep changing. He talks about that as a problem, and for us we think it is a problem that he's still there. But he talks about the presidents and that they keep changing, and they both have different opinions as to how the border should be used. And I think there is a reason why this topic is related to the East African community. These are the options. We tell you initially, I tell you initially that there's a possibility of having a strip, but I also explain why that can't happen, because Kenya is a sovereign state. We give you the second option. I think there's a third option I didn't talk about, because even me, in my mind, I don't like thinking about the worst possible solution. The second option is the war thing that I talked about, and there's no guarantee that you're going to win it. And even if you did win it, there's going to be retaliation again at some point, because Kenya is already Kenya, yeah? And even if you won the war and had access to the Indian Ocean, the cost of accessing the Indian Ocean does not have you do not get enough from accessing it as compared to what you've lost. And there's probably going to be revolt again, because people don't like being ruled by someone else. The third option we talked about, and I said it is nearly impossible, but it could happen in a distant future, is having the East African community, not as simply a community, but I want to say as a country or a state with sub-states in it, as the US is. Because for them initially, they didn't have this separated from this. They thought about the state as one, and then they incorporated others with, I think, charters. I want to say that word, but I don't know if it is with charters. But because for them they started with that initially, it has helped them throughout. That means even the states that were inside and were landlocked have access. They do not care about the border that much. And it's not just the profit. Kenya is bureaucratic in terms of how Uganda accesses the border. They have to make checks at the border. They have to tax you. There's a distance of 711 miles between Uganda and the Indian Ocean if you're moving from Kampala. Yeah? There's that distance, and it has to be moved by road. So at the end of the day, there's too many checks. There's generally too much for Uganda to do before a product accesses the ocean. And I think that is a valid argument. But where someone is speaking, and this is in reference to borders, someone is speaking and they're like, we do not have where to train our navy. The worry is, why do you want to train a navy very close to my state? It is like a country having its army on your border. It is, what are you trying to do? You're threatening to do something, because initially, before a war starts, a country moves its military to another country's border. And they are, I think, I want to say, camped there. So at the end of the day, if Uganda wants to train, I want to say this is a jump into what could possibly happen into the future. You can't say I want to train a navy on the ocean using, I can't say I want to train a navy on the ocean using your shoreline, because you are an independent country. You do not want the threat to be there. You can't predict what is going to happen. What if there is a conflict and you have a gun over my head at the sea or etc.? So by result, I think it is still possible using the East African way, and it could be possible. If interpreted as a war, it is a very bad thing. And I think the president should be careful with what he says. I don't want to advise the president, he's the president, but I think we should be careful with how we interpret what the president has said to us. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And that has been our show with the topic of the fragility of the East African community, a case of the Indian Ocean Saga. So these have been students, they have been educators, and they are youth advocates. They have shared their perspective, their views on what they think the president meant and what are its implications if it was to pass. So thank you very much for joining us for this show. Until next time.